Okay, we'll open our special meeting, Tuesday, May 31st. The approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'll open the floor for public comment. Yeah,
So I'm Jan Siebert Warmond, and this letter is also from my husband, Wes Warmond, PO Box 778, London Beach. Dear Mayor and City Councilors, we'd like to ask for a detailed explanation for the possible rate increases to both our water and wastewater. There seems to have been very little publicity or warning to Cannon Beach residents or businesses regarding this. It seems today that city staff is no longer recommending that you agree to raise our water rates by 15%. However, raising our wastewater rates is another matter, and it is our understanding that you are still being asked by city staff to approve raising those rates by 9%. Thanks to those who have brought this important situation to our attention. As you know, we're very concerned with conserving our Cannon Beach water. We're also interested in ensuring that our wastewater system is working properly. Significant changes to our rates have consequences. We would appreciate better communication. Would it be too much to ask to have a public hearing on these proposed rate increases? A public hearing could be added to the agenda for your June 7th meeting before you have your final vote on the overall 22-23 budget. Thank you for your consideration. And P.S. in the near future, we would also request that you look at how much the Cannon Beach breweries are at present impacting both our water and wastewater system. Thank you.
thank you, Jan. Since there's nobody else in the room, I'll ask if there's anybody online that would like to raise their hand, make a comment. Okay, not seeing any. We'll move on. Pardon?
Oh, actually, there's a hand up.
Sneaky, okay.
Okay, there we go.
Hello.
Hi, this is Mary Beth Cottle on 131 Ross Lane. I just have a quick comment about the rate increase, and I have made this comment previously during previous rate conversations. It seems to me that it would be an incentive for people to save water if there was a graduated rate system where, yes, you have your base amount, but then when you go over the base amount, the rate could go up, and it could even be 2 or 3 tiers. And so if you use a lot of water, you're going to pay a lot more for that water than somebody who is more conservative with their use. I think that it would be a fair way of charging for the use of infrastructure that occurs in houses that have a lot more people in them, or a lot more use of water. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Last chance. Oh, okay. Now we'll move on to our discussion, and I'll turn it over to Bruce for presentation.
Yes, sir. And I'm sorry I didn't catch everything that Mary Beth said, but I believe that the way the rates are structured now, and if you folks would correct me if I'm wrong, we changed that instead of I don't know if it's depending on the number of fixture units or whatever, you got 400 cubic feet of water. And, that kind of continued on. And the way that we have it now, your first 400 is covered for everybody. And then high users pay, they don't get that later on. And so there actually is a surcharge, if you want to call it that, of sorts for, is that correct?
You go above the 400
Right.
Base rate it is. And
Okay.
recall when the Public Works Committee Chair brought this to council, she laid out 4 or 5 examples. An additional tiered level above your base rate was offered to council back at that time. So that was an option that you guys did consider.
But there's a considerable amount for people to go over the 400. So there is a penalty, surcharge, whatever we want to call it. But there are also other rate systems. I think that where I was, we had 5 tiers that, and it was like a very strong penalty. The water was like 10 times more if you were above 40,000, 45,000. That was single family homes. So anyway, we kind of do that now, but it's not structured as a rate going over a certain amount. In the fiscal year 22-23 budget, staff recommendation for utility increases were 15% for water and 9% for wastewater. There are other options and they should have been presented. The most significant factor that impacted the rate recommendations was our recent history of trying to increase our contingencies to 20%, which is consistent with our recent bond rating upgrade efforts. The FY 22-23 rate recommendation applies the 20% contingency to the water reserve and wastewater reserve funds. After further analysis, the water funds do not need the conservative 20% contingency because most of the current projects are debt financed. If the scope or cost of the project were to increase, we could go to contingency, but also the loan could be adjusted in lieu of going to that contingency. If the water reserve fund contingency were to be reduced to 15%, and we were to use a small portion of the fund balance in the water ending fund balance, which the amount we would need is about $10,000. The need for the rate increases for water would be eliminated for this fiscal year. Wastewater is a different situation. There have been numerous transfers to deal with emergency situations, such as replacement generators and check valves and controls that have had a significant negative impact on the FY 21-22 contingency and subsequently the wastewater ending fund balance. The recommended balance of the projects is approximately 50% loan finance and 50% pay as you go. We recommend that the water contingency be maintained at 20% because the contingency is so low and there's no ending fund balance available in the reserve fund. So those are the situations for water and for wastewater. Also want to talk about some of the recommendations there have been on going to ending fund balance or other locations within the funds to cover or to minimize the need for a rate increase at a particular point in time. 2 reasons. One, those balances can be used to pay for as-you-go projects without increasing rates to pay for them if we have ending fund balance. And also, it's not sustainable unless you budget to always have those fund balances available. If that practice is not followed, we will eventually need a rate increase to cover the debt service that had only been delayed by using ending fund balances temporarily available to pay for it. And Rusty, if you put that, I'm talking about up here. I mean, does everybody understand what I'm saying? That if we were to take we only needed $10,000 from water, but if we use ending fund balance because we happen to have a couple of $100,000, 1 year, and we say, okay, we won't need to do a rate increase, then we're going to be down to zero the next year because we weren't able to carry anything forward. And so you're delaying something and potentially making it higher the next time around. But what I want to show you here is if we want to have policy that we will build rates to a certain point that we actually have an ending fund balance. And so in water right now, the ending fund balance is 165,828, and that's with a zero rate increase. If we were to go to option 2, 4%, it would raise another $57,000. We would have $223,000 in that account. And if we were able to maintain an amount like the 57,000, and then the additional funds that we would put in, we could try to build a model that we would have around $250,000 every year based on how much money we were putting in as a result of a rate increase. That would cover that. At some point, we're going to need to do these projects. We're covering the big projects with loans. The other ones we're doing pay as you go. So if we need to get a street, water line done in a street, we're taking it out of, this is our funding source, or a funding source. So that is a possibility if you want to try to do that. If it's a small amount like $10,000, then I don't have any heartburn over reducing it. But if you think about it, the lion's share is taking 5% out of that contingency. That's really where the rate increase was made, that we didn't need it. So that's a possibility if we want to do that. Otherwise, it's hit or miss. And right now, the recommendation is direct staff to adjust the 22-23 budget as described above to address a potential utility rate increase in FY 22-23. That's for at least for water. And also to consider a utility rate that will accommodate a sustainable funding source for pay-as-you-go. But I also want to point out that once you have that in place, for example, if it's a 2%, 4% or whatever, we would want it to be high enough to go ahead and generate the funds that we would want to have available every year. And we wouldn't need to raise rates unless we had a project or two that was more. And then we would raise it one time. But if we were to generate $200,000 a year, we would have those funds available. So with that, I just want to address one comment that Jan made when she said that staff was asking for a rate increase. We're not asking for a rate increase. We're making a recommendation to you who are responsible for the water and sewer system. We're the people that make those recommendations. And so, there's no benefit to us as a result of doing this, but we want to make sure that we're managing your system the best we can.
I have a question on funding. I think we had a major blowout in one of the water mains.
Mhm.
We didn't budget for it. How does that get paid?
I'll ask Lori, but that's going to come from contingency. And then potentially if we had to, we could use some general fund money to take care of it. But we would be able to pay the bill.
They come out of contingency. If it costs more than that, we could draw down the ending fund balance, that portion of it.
Potentially, yeah, potentially. But the, I believe, Lori, did you say the ending fund balance for
Get the money from another, like, general fund.
general fund? But
Yeah.
the ending fund,
Would be any ending fund balance in there. You just have the contingency, zero ending fund balance in the reserve fund.
right, and the wastewater ending fund balance is, I think you told me it was zero this year? Right, so there is no money to go to for that. Okay. But there is a 20% contingency in wastewater. And the fact is, we're doing a lot of stuff and we're taking care of things that have been wrong for a long time, like the generators and controls and some other things. And so We were using contingency because that was the only funding source available. And in one case, I think it was Matanuska, we actually had to get get a generator here so we could finish building the building.
After we did our rate adjustments and the Public Works Committee came and brought us all those really good tools. My understanding was that we were fitting it out so that the rates covered what was needed for those funds. And we were not drawing out of the general fund every year like we had been. Does this mean that we're not quite there yet at wastewater?
So we are there. And we're not taking money for normal operations. And Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not taking money for operations for that. But when but Mike's question was, how would we get the funds if we used up contingency? And that would be a case where we would go, it could be a loan, could be, straight contribution. But that's what the intent was, that they be self-sustaining without the projects is what we've accomplished that.
The council decided several years ago that utility rates stand on their own. We should not be going to the general fund year after year, which we had done for a number of years. And so that's why we went to, I'd say, fairly elaborate rate designs. We did look at the tiered rates. And honestly, I don't remember the arguments why we decided not to go with the tiered, but it was a complication or the fact that the one we chose essentially does the same thing, but because the more water you use, you're going to be paying more. And the more facilities you have on your line, say toilets, you're going to be paying more for the water hookup. Your base rate will be more because you have a larger pipe feeding it. So I think it's very wise to continue to make sure that water rates, the people using the water and sewer, are paying what it takes to maintain and provide those services rather than going to the general fund all the time. So it looks to me like this is doing that. I worry a little bit about reducing the contingency, but I understand in this situation where we have kind of a known amount of expenses because we have loan and debt service, that we probably don't need as high a contingency percentage. I'll turn this off. So,
And Mike,
well, are you going to get to this? history?
Sam asked for that, so
Maybe Sam and I talk about it. Okay. Well, that was my comments.
yeah, and yes. The difference is that if we have loans, it's a second source to go to. And it wouldn't impact rates that much because if you increase the loan, it's paid over 30 years.
Right.
So it wouldn't impact the people that are here now as much.
One of the concepts, and I'm sure we talked about this back then at the big discussion, but was when I looked at I just asked for the rates so it has something to compare. Basically, I was curious how it's grown and stuff like that. Why we never increased dramatically the add-on fee compared to the base rate. We always keep adding to the base rate. We're increasing the base rate, but we don't increase other than what it looks like is about 3% of a normal increase. Or the additional 100 cubic foot rate, which I would think would be, to Mary Beth's concern, as a more of an incentive for using less water environmentally than the tiered level is just to start charging more for the excess water. That's kind of a side thing from what we're talking about. The concern I've been running into, and I'm surprised how many people have talked to me about this, because rates are a sore point right now. Because everything else is going up, why not raise the water? So I'm disinclined right now to do this solely on the fact that we might have more projects that are going to be expensive. I think we can find ways to fund them out of the general fund. For this instance, for this year, or maybe a couple of years, and then really consider another jump after that in the rates. But I'm disinclined right now.
If you do that, you just, and what I think city's done for a long time, let's kick the issue right on down the road. And you and I won't be here in 6 months. So I like that idea, actually. Well, I think it counter to, I think, a good sound utility policy of you making the services cover themselves. You start going to the general fund, it's hard to quit doing that.
Well, it's what we did in the past.
And then it became very difficult.
Yes.
There's some very large increases and a lot of upset people, which I'm looking at this right now. Just looking at not the base rate, the base rates remain fairly constant, but from the 320, well, from 2018, there was a rate of 24.20. 2019, same rate. 2020, same rate. And then there was a 6-month adjustment there. So we haven't really had a gradual increase in rates. We didn't increase the rates. And now we really need to increase the rates. And it's a cause for concern. And if we continue to put that off, the cause for concern will grow and grow until pretty soon we're back to the old way. And that is using the general fund to pay for the services we provide in our utilities.
Sam, I think too, if we're talking about, well, the water, we've found a way to not do it this year. It'll possibly have to be done subsequently, but if in wastewater, if we don't raise rates in wastewater, then we either cancel the projects. Sorry, we can cancel half the projects. We can't cancel the projects that we've already are getting loans for. So we have to pay the debt service. So you can go ahead and reduce that by half. And then you're going to have to do those projects eventually, or you take money out of the general fund and then put that in and say, we'll pay for those projects with general fund. And we're trying to avoid that, but also we are, the wastewater system was neglected for a long time. And we are now just getting to where we are taking care of things that should have been taken care of, that weren't just rigged some way to keep going. And we're replacing equipment. And we have generators that we had to have the generator company come over and start for us because that was the condition that they were in. And so we're fixing those things, and that's where that money is gone.
I understand where it's gone and I understand where it's going. What I'm saying is it's really bad timing because all of a sudden we're in massive inflation, possibly recession, and residents are paying more already for everything else. And that's not a reason to pay more for your water. And then on top of that, I was brought up, and I'm still sticking to the concept, was never a codified promise, but it was a concept that came about when the transient room tax was developed, that would help pay for some of your water, your services. I'm still stuck with that. So again, it wasn't ever anything. It was just kind of an implied promise that we would keep our rates lower than normal than everybody else because we had a room tax. And I mentioned that during the rate increases 3 years ago, whenever we did that. But the argument for the rates covering the operations makes sense. I agree with that. Some of the new projects and some of the needed projects, because we haven't maintained the maintenance, I agree with that too. But I think some of that should be funded through the general fund.
What if we had the Public Works Committee take another hard look at our schedule of projects over the next 5 years and see, working with Public Works, if some of those projects themselves could be delayed, which ultimately are going to have to be done. And ultimately, they may be done with even more dollars than what we pay in today's inflated rate. Who knows what the future is? But if it's a heartburn right now, we take a look at shifting up those that are already covered, you know, where we've already borrowed money to do it. Those got to be finished. Maybe there's some others that priorities could be to the year, help reduce future increases. But ultimately, you know, we have good justification why those projects have to be done. So all you're doing is just, whether you say we're not going to have a rate increase now, it's going to hit you later. You're going to say we're not going to do the projects now, they're going to hit you later. The alternative is say we're just not going to do it. We're just going to go back like the old days and let things curate and patch them as they fail. And I'm not in favor of that.
Well, to your point, Sam, I believe what we're doing is already keeping our rates fairly low because they're lower than surrounding areas already. Even with the increase that we've already put in, and I'm not sure where we would go from here if we agree as a council to another rate increase, but I'm pretty sure we're still below other communities in the area.
We were in the middle. There was 2 or 3 above, 2 or 3 below. We were right smack in the middle.
I'm sorry if I misspoke.
No, you were correct. I was just trying to give some specifics to what you were saying, adding.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I don't want to
Yeah.
really misspeak.
I
trying to back you up.
understand that, and I agree, you know, that if you look at a regional sense, but I've been contacted by some folks that are in fixed income.
Sure. I
In that case, you know, what they pay in Astoria makes no difference to them. And that's where becomes a challenging issue right at this moment. It's possible we could look at it in September and be totally different. We don't know where the economy is going to be. But my guess is at least within the next few months, it's going to be tight. So can we save somebody a few bucks? Maybe we can. That's kind of what I was looking at as it's the total of your residential charges. That you look at that and how it's just gone up at a fairly steady rate that is obvious, but it still just keeps going up. I don't know. That again was why I was looking more at the additional rate that were to increase that would not affect those folks who are on fixed income. It would affect people that are visiting and their other users. But most of the folks on fixed incomes are probably below the 400 cubic foot to start with, or at least at it. That's where I'm at. And the challenge I'm noticing is we've already baked in something into the budget as an increase, correct?
Yeah, but we can adjust it.
confused in terms of, we had a water, when we had our water master plan, we were talking about rate increases and all of that a while back. We had a whole schedule of rate increases that went from, I think, last year all the way through another 10 years. I don't remember that those increases were as high as what we're looking at now.
That's correct.
Is that,
That's correct. What the difference,
what happened to that plan?
well, first, water, we're not increasing the rates and we're looking at what, an 8% this year. So we're able to offset that. The other part of it is, that was a projection done on what we anticipated the debt service to be on those projects. And that was what the numbers were. But like in wastewater this year, there's half the projects aren't covered by debt service. They're cash, they're pay as you go. And so that is going to be on top of whatever those projections were.
So what we approved wasn't really what was going to happen, is that, did you know that at the time?
No, but you didn't approve anything. We gave you a projection based on the debt service. If we changed from pay as you go to doing the loans in debt service. And we gave you a projection based on what those numbers were that we knew at the time. We didn't know we were going to do the replacements that we did in wastewater this year to burn down the contingency. We didn't know that we were going to be 50-50 on the projects this year that still need to be done. We don't have the same deal as what with wastewater projects as we were able to get with water. So the numbers, the projections, I believe possibly in water, we were too high because we were projecting an 8% and we're able to not do that. So were we 100% on, and were those something you could take to the bank? No, but by being conservative, we're actually coming in lower than what we thought in water. And what's throwing us off is the money we spent this year fixing things that have needed to be fixed for a long time. So we don't have another Matanuska. And then I'm adding some other projects. So the work that was done, the work that was approved in the budget, the work that came before you saying that we need these things to be done. And you agreed. And so that's what took down the contingency. We didn't know that those things were going to happen when we did that model.
One of the things that has come up that I don't think is something that's been an issue for a long time is the outfalls and that whole issue, which would fall under Public Works, correct?
The outfalls, the drainage outfalls?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, yes, they do, but they're not part of this budget.
but it was money that had to be used for why we're where we are, correct?
I'm not sure if I understand your question, Robin.
Well, it just seems like there was so much money spent on the outfalls and still will be. And is that coming out of the
General fund. Is it general fund?
general fund?
Or the,
Are you talking the presidential storm outfalls and what we have pending?
I'm talking about 7th Street. I'm talking about, yes, presidential as well.
And that was in the budget that I presented to you guys during the budget session, is to let you know that we don't know which way State Parks is going to go on that. They may go with our recommendation with a lower level first phase, and then let us do the rest of it after we've had a winter season to see if that proves itself out. Or they may come back and say, we want you to deal with all 5 outfalls and the presidentials all at once. So I consider the whole ball of wax because I don't know which way they're going.
But that's a line item, right? That's not out of wastewater.
It is.
Storm.
That
yeah, it's our storm.
have a storm.
Okay, and also I think, what will we spend on 7th? About 35,000, if I have it right?
I don't want to speculate. I have to go back.
Okay, but it was in that kind of a number because we had enough room to put like sumps out to be able to do.
It was done and then it was redone.
When it was redone, we added more of what we had already done. Because they liked what we did, they just wanted more of it, and so we just put in a couple more lines.
I think the key is that that did not come out of.
No, it does not come out of these dollars.
Okay. Well, I am hearing what Sam is saying about the people that are on fixed incomes. And I like Mary Beth's suggestion of making it maybe even a little more varied tier situation. And I also agree that this is a horrible time to be doing this just because of what's been happening in the last month. So I also would be very hesitant to burden people with this right now. I like the idea in my CAD, which was to have Public Works Committee look at the projects and maybe prioritize which ones are absolutely first and have that discussion too.
But keep in mind, they have already done that. Be asking to take another hard look and see if there's any more they could do.
Mhm,
And that's just in light of the economy,
Yeah,
you know,
mhm.
so it's a reactionary, but
Well, and things have really changed in the last month.
and I don't know if it'd be still able to use Carolyn's modeling tool. I can't remember what we called that.
Mhm.
And see what would happen if we jumped up the additional 100-foot cubic foot rate
Mhm.
values to see if that would make a difference.
Lori actually put a budget study, I'm sorry, not a budget, a rate study in this year's budget. So it is something that we can do. And those are the kind of things that we can ask them to model. I don't know if I would try to use Carolyn's thing and say we could do this ourselves. I think we need to get a rate group to do the work for us.
I would ask Public Works Committee to comment on that, just because I think it's pretty straightforward. I could probably do the math here by hand, but it would take me a couple hours. So just plugging in a little bit extra on that, seeing where it would go, just
I think you're right. Committee along with Public Works help to run that.
Right.
Each effort.
I'd be very hesitant to do a home study for rates and then say, we'll go ahead and operate for a year and hope we were right. I think that we should have the rate study company do the work because I don't know if, I don't know anybody besides Carolyn would be able to go ahead and operate that. So I'm just making my recommendation. When you're talking about rates, responsibility to properly fund a utility system, I would have professionals do the rates.
I think we're just talking a little bit of different degree. Because all I'm saying is we have a tool that you can plug a number into and it jumps everything up or it jumps everything down or it moves things around. That just gives you a quick idea. I'm not saying that's the decision I would make on that.
Mhm.
I'm just saying, what would that do? We've got that tool. Use the tool.
Mhm.
If the tool says, "Ooh, this is actually dramatic," then you hire somebody to prove it. But that's the,
I think it's not a question of whether it's dramatic. I know it can be made to work. But if you're talking about having a single rate, that's one thing. If you're talking about having 2 tiers, 3 tiers, then, but if you want to talk about, rates and how we're doing that, those are the kind of questions you need to ask. I can tell you that if you reduce the amount that people pay every month, it'll increase over here. And it depends how much like you said, you could probably do that with a pencil, how much you got to go ahead and have it come out. So there's no mystery on that. The question is, how far do you want to go down? What happens when you go down? And then how much does the rate increase, turn around? And also you're talking are you talking about having the highest users pay the highest rate? Or right now we have a system that somebody over 400 pays a higher rate, but are you going to have that tiered? Like, and I can tell you that people that we reduced our water consumption by 25%, but we had a very punitive rate system and we didn't have any water. So it is possible to do. Sam, and I understand what you're saying. I just, if we are going to do this, I just want to get it done right and done. And so if you give us some parameters, we can get that study done. If we can take some time and mess with Carolyn's model, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't take it to the bank. As I said before, we would still end up doing something. And we know it's going to happen. If you reduce on this side, these people are going to pay more. If you reduce on this side, somebody's got to pay more over here.
Yeah, I don't think Carolyn's model, it's the city's model now, the one developed by the committee and a great deal by Carolyn. I don't recall it has the ability, as was handed to us, didn't have the ability to do tiered rates in all these categories.
Mhm.
I think we can plug in numbers. Does it have?
Correct. Yeah, the tool, just to clarify, the tool was created by the consultant and they taught Carolyn and I how to use it and finance. And once we were done with our rate analysis, they turned that tool over to us for future use. So our current Public Works Committee and even the folks that were on when Carolyn was chair and Les was the committee were no way prepared to manage that tool. And so we have it and we can do, like Bruce said, a cursory level look at that for you. But it is not set up to be multi-tiers, and I don't even know if our billing system is set up to support that.
Yeah, I never mentioned tiers. That came from previous parts of the conversation. I was talking simply about the additional 100 cubic foot rate.
Understood.
If that was bumped up a little bit, how dramatic of an increase does that show in our end of the year revenue? That seems, if that's capable of doing that,
We can do that in-house here.
because it just hurts more when you see that the base rate is the only thing getting dramatic increases. And the larger users get up, yes, they get paid, they pay more, but that's fairly flat.
Sam, what would be your suggestion? Would you suggest that the above 400 cubic feet rate raise so that we would be recouping what we need in lieu of the proposed rate increase?
Kind of the other way around. I would be curious to find out if a little bit of increase on the 100 additional cubic footage could reach the numbers that we're needing to cover the projects that were already started.
Okay,
If it can't, then it can't. I mean, but I'm curious if that would be a place to garnish some of the more revenue rather than hurting the folks that it's going to hurt the worst.
I think we could do it at the opposite approach on that. And that's we find out how many people are using less than 400 and how much they generate. And then we know how many gallons they use. We know how many gallons we use total. Then we do the math to go ahead and say that you need to raise the rates by this much to equal the dollar amount that you had. And to, if you are trying to address the people that are on a fixed income, I think that it's possible from a policy standpoint is that if you folks instruct us to go with a lower amount, a lower base rate, the first 400 or whatever, then as Sam said, those people probably are never going to go over that amount or be impacted over here. But we can also provide some relief so that when they pay their, whatever the 400 is, that they'll pay less, but it gets made up by somebody on the other side. So if that's your decision, and I get it, I think that is a good one because it is hard. It's always going to be hard for people on fixed income to make it. So if we want to try to go ahead and help, then I would suggest that we tweak the base rate. And then, it would have to adjust on the, for everybody else. Robin, you look like you had a question. Is that?
I don't know. I guess I'm wondering if you can assume that everyone that is on fixed income is using 400. That was what I was,
No, you can't.
you can't. Mm-mm.
And how do we know who's fixed income and who isn't?
We don't.
Any-
We don't, but Sam's point was he was contacted by people that are on fixed income. And eventually, if we're going to raise the rates, or maybe you have a lower rate, a 200 cubic feet for people that are,
Way lower.
yeah, like considerably lower because they're using less water and all, and then that would help them from a rate standpoint when they're paying their monthly bill. But if you use more water, you're going to fall into one of the other tiers. There is, in fact, there's a subsidy there, but I don't think it'll be much. I don't think we have.
Yeah, I understand where you're going with that, and that's great if we could figure out some sort of way to help folks, but my feeling is that the base rate as it is now hurts, but it's okay. I just would want to see if we can garnish the funds that we need through the additional rate.
And I'm just thinking, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I probably sound like I am. What I found is that eventually it does, you can go ahead and hold off a rate increase and, target people that are on the on fixed income. At some point you have to raise it and they're still on fixed income. And so if we want to acknowledge that maybe we want to set a different tier or something for people that are not using much water. Because I think you said, Sam, if they're only using 200 or 250 or whatever, they're paying for the right to use 400. And so maybe we have a thing that might acknowledge that. But anyway, that was my thought.
That would work. It's just more complex than I was heading for, but it worked.
I think, I want to be careful. I want to give that a little bit more time to cogitate here. Because if we have people that are second homeowners,
Yeah.
they're very low water users, potentially they would benefit from it too. So we have to kind of be careful how we implement that.
But my sense of this is all of this needs to go to the Public Works Committee so that they can be giving us some recommendation on it. Because that's,
We still have some rates to do, budget. And so one possibility is that we bring you another project list. And it would probably be the one that impacts utilities, not utilities, but wastewater more. So that we can say, okay, well, we'll take off these two or whatever projects, or we'll pay for them out of general fund. If Karen says that they're high enough priority that they need to be done. So there is a way to bring back something that could lower the wastewater rate. We've already got the water down to 0. So there is a way to do that. And if you want, we can try to do that for the 7th. And I think the 14th is the day you're going to adopt the budget, but it's possible we can bring something back. I know we can. We can bring something back with a transfer from the general fund that would eliminate the wastewater increase this year. Now, I can't tell you how much it's going to take from the general fund. That might scare you, but I don't know. And also we can look at potentially deferring some projects. But it's all deferred.
Well, I'm gonna do a little twist here because I'm not recommending that we go to zero
Mhm.
on the increases. I think what we need to do is what I had assumed that we had done when we did the wastewater or the rate plan for public works was that we were setting up a flat increase that would just be those standard increase all the way through. Which is where we were at in the lower section here, where it was 3% every year.
Mhm.
I have no troubles with that kind of increase. That's the normal established increase that everything goes up everywhere. 3% every year kind of thing. That's the inflation rate. No troubles with that. It's when they get these big 15, 20% jumps that I have troubles with. More to consider.
But it is possible for us to bring you a 0, a 2, whatever number you want. But there's going to be ramifications either coming from general fund or pushing projects out.
And I have no problem with it coming from the general fund if we can do that.
Well, if it comes from general fund, we'll have to also know what's not going to be financed by general fund. If there's a general fund project that we are looking at that we just won't be able to pay for because we're taking it out of general fund unless we have an ending balance or a contingency that we could use. That
Yeah, we
hurt us that much.
it was probably, I wouldn't want to reserve, we reduce the amount to the reserve, which was put in 700, but potentially, either contingent out of contingency for the general fund or from, projected balances. We say this balance is going to go down by this amount, and that amount will be what we, have to offset on the wastewater. But I don't think that we'll go into, I don't think that we're that low that in order to take $100,000 that we have to cancel a project. It's just we won't have as much there. And this is, again, these are all policy decisions and, but we can bring you the information. And I would suggest we do it on the 7th. And you can talk about it then. But I would be interested in, are you wanting 2% or 0%?
I'd like,
Give us a target.
I'd like to see us go back to the 3% increase, just get back there and say, we had 3% for a long time. And then we went to 0 for 3 years.
Mhm.
Which was a mistake, but nobody wanted an increase. Now we're looking at a bigger increase. At a minimum, we do with these other ideas. I'd like to see us at least initiate for this budget year a 3% increase. Or
To your point, Mike, we are exactly where we are because of just stated. And I see us going forward. I can't say this with any certainty. Maybe you can enlighten me a bit, Bruce, but moving forward, we're going to need to pay for these projects or, deal with some, as you stated, projects that just go undone and then having to, do like we did down at Whale Park or, the Matanuska pump station failure.
be taken care of them at emergency rates instead of a planned early replacement.
Exactly. And so I would like to get to a position where we can telegraph that to the public that it is a legitimate need.
Mhm.
I don't think we've done a good job of that, but I mean, I understand why we are where we are. It's never popular to raise rates.
Sure. I think too, we need to realistically, we need to increase the rates 3% just to cover inflation on all the things that we do. Salaries, all those kind of things, the increases to consultants. So if we're doing 0, then this year we'll be going backwards. And so if we go 3%, we're just staying even. And so anything above is actually new.
That's why I'm saying at an absolute minimum,
Right.
3%.
Right.
That's a zero increase. I prefer what you outlined at the beginning of this discussion.
It changed to 15% in the contingency, which we think we can do. And then make that one transfer. And we would bring you a resolution that says these things. But Sam, I hear what you're saying, and this has always troubled me. How do you make sure that you're not burdening people that are on a fixed income, when you're trying to go ahead and get things done? Because if you just tie to that, you really aren't going to get things done. And so, and so I just want to know how to do it. But again, 3%, and we're covering our costs. And I think that we can have a discussion. If you want us to have the discussion with Public Works Committee first, we can do that. But there's the offset, the things that you folks are going to be balancing against. Like right now, we're already in the process of doing the water lines down and the water tank and all that, so that we can have a system where we can get water down to the town. Next step was to be able to distribute it north and south. So, we could defer those or whatever. But I think that if we're trying to offset a 3 or 5% or something increase, and we don't do those projects, I think that those are things that need to happen to be able to serve the folks in the town. So, but we can talk about it when we get to that point. Yeah.
I just want to clarify that the Public Works Committee has done what you guys have asked them to do, and that is to prioritize projects that we did before you in the Budget Committee. The thing that we haven't done is look beyond this year's budget to look at a forward look yet. We're not there yet, but they'll do that. So if I take this back to them, all they're doing is making a decision of which projects they want to take off the table. Because we've already prioritized these are the projects they wanted us to go forward with in the Budget Committee. So they've gone through this exercise multiple times, above and beyond our water resiliency projects that you allowed me to secure the loans for. Midway and Siuslaw pump stations and the Harrison Street water line replacement are the only things that we're doing that is above and beyond those loans. And so it comes to them saying, we'll take them off the table. I mean, that would be their decision. At this point, there's no more to prioritize.
And what you're saying is that would be the council's decision.
Absolutely. I mean, the Public Works Committee would have to agree that I would come back to you and say, this is what our decision would be if you're not willing to go forward with this and make those adjustments. But 2 years ago in February, and then again in March, when I presented all of our water resiliency, the 4% and 8% was what was on Lori's chart as far as rate increases that she had predicted, and just what Nancy said, it was way beyond that. And so if I go back to the Public Works Committee, it would be them just eliminating those other 3 projects that we've been discussing.
Well, I remember, I looked at the wastewater study, and it was kind of a community discussion last fall during the tax debate. And I remember doing the math on it, was like an average of 4% increase a year. I mean, there were a couple of years where there's 0%, and then there was another year that was 9.5 or something like that. So, but it averaged out 4% per year.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly willing to go with anywhere from 4 to 8% myself. Just because we need to get these projects done. But
And that's before we knew we had 2 billion generators and a rental that cost me $3,000 a month
Yeah.
to sit out here and run our pump station.
No, I see all these projects as being very important. They've been vetted numerous times by Public Works, to some extent by our consultant, engineering, by the council. And now we're looking at a way to pay for them and saying, oh, gee, we don't want to pay for them. We're going to go to the general fund to pay for them, or we're just not going to do them at all. I think it's a mistake. It's calling me for all these years, just kicking these things, these hard decisions, just kicking them down the road. Back to what Nancy was saying, you know, or maybe it's what I said earlier, we should have been increasing this gradually all along instead of going 3 years with 0. That was a big mistake. But nobody wanted to see an increase and we gave in. Okay. Time to pay the piper, and maybe ramp up to it from this point. You know, when I said the 3%, that's minimum, that's standing still. I don't think we should stand still. We need to move forward with the projects we have. A 4% or one of them is, I think, doable. Going 8%. Look, the dollar amount, I'm not sure it's severe, but sounds severe. It's I'm following some of Bruce's ideas, I think. Or maybe it's staff's ideas that were presented at the beginning. It just makes a lot of sense. If you want to arbitrarily say, well, we're not going to go 8, we'll go 6. What's your basis? A dollar on your monthly rate? I mean, why would you do that?
I shared with you the material spikes that we saw, you know, over this 14 months, and just the average is 36%. So when you take that, consider what Bruce is saying about the 3% increase, you're almost not even breaking even. And we don't know where the economy is going to go. And so if that continues to be our reality, we're barely being able to keep up with what the infrastructure requires for me to just maintain it and not do anything extra. And that's kind of a vulnerable position to be. I did want to touch on the rate increase you mentioned, Sam. When Carolyn and Les and them were going over the whole analysis, we looked at who the audience was with the tool of, you know, making increases based on the base rate and or the usage above. Your bigger users are your businesses. And so as we're talking about, you know, the normal Joe Blow that's on a fixed income and that base rate, I would ask council to please consider that if we do monkey with that, you know, above that 400 cubic feet, that's the audience that you're going to be hurting when we just implemented the food tax. And so I can bring you back anything that you want that this tool can do for us. But I would say just be aware that that's your more heavy users. Less complimented or commented that, you know, he's on a fixed income, but he irrigates his lawn. He said, why should I be punished because I irrigate my yard? Well, it's a balance between water conservation and that extra user. And so the Public Works Committee struck that balance with adjusting that because they had thought about bringing it down to 200. That was one of the things that they had shared with you. And so they teetered back and forth on that base rate and try to find that sweet spot, if you will, where we weren't punishing any audience per se, that we kind of distributed that based on more higher user pays more. So if we're gonna monkey with that, that's the audience that you're gonna be impacting, and that might not be the good time for that either. So maybe we go back to what Bruce said and kind of distribute that more reasonably, where no particular audience is being really hammered, you know. Just food for thought.
I'll touch upon a couple of comments here, and I think I still feel a little misunderstood. I want to move forward on the projects. I don't want to kick it down the road. I understand what that means. I think it should be paid for out of the general fund. I think these big projects in several cases are unique in the fact that they are an expansion of our system and an upgrade and repair, and all the different issues. But I think the general fund is not asking our limited residential folks to pay for everything. It is asking all of the users to help pay for it. That's what our general fund does, because we are mostly transient room tax. I'm not even kicking into what possibility the food and beverage tax is going to do yet, because I don't know. But I think that's one of my concerns about how we're expecting to do large water projects, and we're doing really important maintenance projects. I agree with all that. It's just, where's the funding coming from? And this water rate increase hits a very small portion of our user. That's the resident. And I kind of, that became really evident when I noticed the numbers that Bruce put out about how many hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm actually saying there needs to be a little bit of an increase. We're going to ask increases on the folks in general. I think it'd be a little bit extra, not a lot, just a little bit extra on the upper user level, and help maintain some balance for those folks that are really hurting. That's where I'm at.
You know, one way to look at this is like energy companies look at it. They have a transmission rate, a backbone rate, or let's say we're getting loans, that's what they would do for the north-south backbone, for the springs to the reservoirs themselves. Those benefit the entire city equally. I could see that funding coming from a general fund, but from all the distribution and maintaining the lift stations and the pipes in the street and all that being covered through the utility rates, until you look at just pulling back, saying transmission main would be a general fund project, and look at the increase for the distribution going to the rates. I mean, that's
The problem with that is water gets funded. We can get loans and stuff for the water. It's the wastewater that doesn't get the extra funding. I think that's what Bruce said. The beneficial funding for,
What we get, what are the rates, like 3%?
Matanuska, we got the loan for that,
Was it 3%?
right?
Yeah, 3% instead of 1.
Up to, $500,000 to 50% principal forgiveness. And so we did get the loan for that. We tried to get for Midway and Siusla, and we did not get that. And so that's why I brought that forward to you and asked you to fund those additions for those generators this year.
yeah, it's just, when I heard that, it felt to me like one of those corporate tricks where you have to buy the printer at a really low price and you get, coupons for that. but the ink is like jacked up like crazy. And that's what we have. We can we get the water, but when we have wastewater, all of a sudden the prices are harder to pay for. I don't know. And that's the difference between the loan financed and the pay-as-you-go projects. And I don't have that detail in front of me, so I can't tell you that.
Sam, I think it was just how much we had to spend in the past year or two for waste. Because we put a whole bunch of money, over. And I don't know, maybe that didn't affect the rates at all.
Well, it goes back a long time ago when the three versions, water, wastewater, sewer, were not balanced, and one was always cockeyed and always funding one more than the other from the general fund. I agree. That's where it came from. But I don't know.
It's difficult to get too cute with the rates, I think.
I agree.
I mean, even this thing I have outlined is a little cute for such a small system. We don't have massive transmission lines from reservoirs miles away, it's so integral to everything else we have. I think that's why we have the rates designed the way we do. They are all paid by the users. And you start carving out pieces and say, well, this piece will come from the general fund because the lodging taxes are 65% of that. And that way they pay a larger share. I mean, you're starting to, it's sort of like the shell game, I'm afraid.
Let me suggest something. I think that it makes sense to do a minimum of a 3% because that keeps us whole. And then for this year, that we bring back a proposal, how we can use some offsets from the general fund to get the rate increase down in wastewater down to that 3%. And that will give us a year to make decisions about how how we want to move forward in funding utilities. And I hope that we end up that utilities pay for themselves. I think that going to the general fund is kind of a slippery slope, but that's y'all's decision to make and we'll get to it.
Well, I agree with you, Bruce.
Yeah.
I do. I'm with Nancy and Mike. I'm in favor of a rate increase. I don't know exactly what that is. I haven't heard this evening other than a baseline of 3%. Have we gotten to the point that we have agreed to discuss this on the 7th as council?
I think 3% is saying we're standing still. I don't think we should do that. Again, I said that'd be the minimum, but I don't think doing the minimum is the right thing to do. I would still go with Paul and Bruce's idea, at least 4% on the water. But recognize right now, there's some expenses on the wastewater. We're gonna have to catch up on.
Yes. And moving forward, we're possibly looking at more.
Yeah.
What if we were to do kind of a blended model where we do maybe a 2%, instead of going to 4, we do a 2% for water because it's in relatively good shape. But then we go maybe 4 or 6 on the wastewater side. Try to get it in the balance, get it to where it needs to be. We don't have to have the same rate increase for both.
All right.
2 will keep us whole, I think, for another year. But to Robin's point, with everything that's going on right now, I don't think that we'll be able to keep things like rates flat unless we just drop projects. And I don't know how long that would be for, and I don't know how long that would come back to bite us. But just a suggestion, maybe a 2 and a 5 or 2 and a 6 to try to get wastewater back up to where it needs to be.
Just to be able to move forward with the budget.
Yeah.
While we reevaluate
But we really have,
next year.
we need to have a conversation about where we need to go.
Well, I'm willing to advance that this evening. I don't think we all want to stay here for hours and hours. I'm more than supportive of continuing this discussion on the 7th. But what is our obligation in order to subsidize inflation? That's essentially what we're being proposed.
Virtually everybody that I'm aware of, businesses, whatever, you increase costs.
Exactly. So why do we all of a sudden, when we find ourselves in the same position, have to justify that?
Just tank, and I didn't see the guy there saying, oh, gee, it's pretty expensive. I think I'll give you a 20% discount.
No, your alternative is to use less.
Yeah, exactly. Use less.
And I mean, I feel for ratepayers, but we're under the same constraints as everyone else.
The business of running the city, the cost of that has gone up, just like everything else. It's gone up a lot more than 3%, 4%.
I don't think we're trying to justify raising it for the inflation rate. I'm not. I'm saying, yeah, that's fine. But that's what it should always be. And we need to get to that point, and I agree that we're not there on wastewater. I would say adjust the additional rate up.
Mhm.
So do the 3% on the ones that we need to, and to Bruce's point, water is okay, so taking that down a little bit, but as long as it's not more than 9% on the total residential charge in that sense, but then the additional rate, work with that, take that one up, because that hasn't gone up forever. It's flat. It's been 3% all along. I think that's what it looks like. And that's not even detailed out as a percentage anywhere. That one has the potential to say, okay, let's take that one to, bless you. Take that to 4 or 5 or whatever works.
Mhm.
Or whatever helps. So. And. Anybody on? Not a problem.
Is there anything that you would like us to bring to you on the 7th? We talked about an amount that might need to come from general fund to offset the projects. So you have that you can make that decision. Remember this, am I correct that this will be done on the 14th? So we don't have to vote on the 7th, do we?
No, but when we have the public hearing for consideration of adopting the approved budget, if council wishes to make a change to the budget at that time, then you need to make a motion and then adopt whatever motion you all agree upon. And then we would have to come back to adopt the budget that you've changed.
So we couldn't do it on the 14th.
Another meeting after the 14th.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, it's be done before July 1st, right?
So if we can resolve it on the 7th, whatever you want to do, then we can stay on the track to do the 14th. And what you will adopt is a resolution that changes the rates. You're not going to do an ordinance or, public hearing or anything like that. It's not required.
But it can be discussed in the public hearing that we will have before we adopt the budget, right?
Sure. And anything in the budget is fair as, and also the discussion on the 7th. Anybody can well, whatever your rules are going to be on that night. But if you want to have open discussion or whatever, it's, you make the rules.
Any other comments or concerns? Okay. At that, I will, say we'll move on to the 7th and I'll call for good of the order. Anything else?
And if the thought is we're going to be having to add an extra meeting to adopt the budget because you're going to change it on the 14th, you would want to look at calendars and get something set so that way we don't have to do it on the 7th. Or do you want to wait till the 7th?
Anything as long as it's not next week.
I think let's try to accomplish what we can on the 7th. And Lori, will the 7th be soon enough or will we still need to add a meeting? If they decide on the rate, whatever we're going to do with rates on the 7th,
That's completely separate from adopting the budget. They can do whatever rate increase they want at any time. And then when they deliberate through the public hearing over the approved budget, you know, you're basically making a decision whether you adopt the approved budget or you make a motion to change the approved budget to reflect whatever you're trying to do. And then I would bring back the budget with the changes that you've made in order for you to vote on adopting it.
so Lori, if we were to on the 7th, make a decision, I'm just making numbers up, increase water by 2%, increase wastewater by 4%, 6%, whatever, and then move X dollars over from the general fund to help offset wastewater. If those decisions were all made that night, can you make the changes? We've done a presented budget, but those are going to change revenues. They're not going to change.
Bring them ahead of time. I have to bring them after they've deliberated on the approved budget through a public hearing. So you can't change the budget until you've had your public hearing. And
Okay.
and you close the public hearing, you have discussion on whether you want to adopt the approved budget or whether council comes up with some motion that changes the approved budget in some fashion. And then I'll bring back the document after that discussion has been had, so that you can then adopt the resolution that reflects the changes that you've made. It can't be done at the same meeting because I've talked to the state of Oregon already about the process. And that's what they've advised me.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that we will have a meeting on the 7th. And then on the 14th, we will adopt the budget with an amendment. We will make an amendment to the budget.
This is approved by the budget.
Lori?
Or together you can decide and make a motion, or you all get together on one specific change that you want to make to the approved budget, then you can make that motion. Then I have to bring back the changes that you've made to another meeting so that you can adopt the resolution that reflects the changes, if you want to make changes that you've outlined
So say that by the 21st then,
before June. Well, on
July
30.
So just to kind of give a recap, the way the June works for you guys already, we have a meeting on the 7th. We have a meeting on the 8th with CETA. We're going to meet on the 14th, which is the work session / special meeting. And we're meeting on the 29th to do the joint meeting with the code audit. And then from, if they make changes, how long do you have? Like, we can't go back the next night because you have to make those changes, right? So you would need a couple days to get everything ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Couple
we wouldn't be
days,
able
yeah.
to see you the very next night, the Wednesday.
Kind of like waiting the week to get it to the 21st, if that works. In case there's any more work to be done or questions to be answered.
Okay. And Council Chambers is available on the 21st
At night,
At what time?
at night,
at night.
at 6.
It's
Okay,
booked during the day.
okay.
That's gonna be a busy day.
Is that what we're deciding or not? Do I put it on my calendar or
It
not?
works for me.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
I'd like to get it done as soon as possible.
That's what we're doing then.
Okay, so we're gonna do June 24th first at 6 p.m.
That's okay with you, Lori? Okay,
That's if an amendment is made on the 7th.
No, I think that it's pretty much going to be that. Because there's something in Reader's Digest version, I would say count on 3 dates. But Lori has got, we have a budget that's been published and said that this is what we're going to do. If we have a discussion and on the 14th, we go ahead and we make a change, that it's going to have to be changed in the budget, even though we've adopted the budget, I guess, on the 14th.
Not if you're making a change. You will
Okay.
not adopt the approved budget if there's going to be a change made.
Okay,
Because I will have a resolution at that point that reflects your wishes, because I don't know what your wishes are.
Let me ask a really one more confusing question. If we just adopted the budget we have, how hard is it to change the rates after that?
So the approved budget allows for that additional revenue. And so at 20% contingency in the water fund, it would not be feasible if you do not go through with the rate increase that's in the approved budget. So
that was what was
that
recommended.
wouldn't work.
That's the 15 and the 9.
Or essentially, we're required to make a change. I
No,
don't think that works.
no, you're not required to make a change if you stay with, I think it was 15 and 9. Because that's what the revenue would generate, but we're talking about making a change. And so if we make that change, Lori's got to adjust the water, wastewater, and several other budgets that are all tied to those.
It's all changing the revenue, therefore we have to rebalance.
Right. But not, and it's not, it goes outside of just the utilities. And to complicate a little bit more, if we're talking about moving some money from general fund, then that's just one more variable that has to be covered. So let's get as much done as we can on the 7th. And then we will get further guidance on where we have to be for the next 2 Tuesday nights.
Okay, with that, plan for a long 7th and anything for the good of the order.
I have one. Speaking of meetings, July 5th is, I'm double booked on July 5th. It turns out that there's a dress rehearsal on July 5th coaster. And since I'm doing the lights and sound for that, I'm asking that either it starts at 7:30. So I'm asking that either we have a lighter agenda than usual on Tuesday night, regular meeting, which she laughs when she says that, or that we meet a little earlier in the evening, like around 5. And I'll have to leave here probably about 7:15.
And I'm not certain I can even make the meeting, so.
It's the day after the 4th, right?
Yeah.
So
Nancy, to answer your question, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
yeah,
Good, thank you.
So
I don't
five,
know what to do about you, Mike, but
What's the meeting on the sixth?
That would be a potential CETA meeting. They would be presenting the next,
The program.
the program. July, because there's one in June and potentially one in July.
schedule.
Yeah, June 8th is where they present the result of all the discussions they've had. Then you'll approve certain things. They don't do that, then they will come back with a program. And that's where we'll kick off the design.
Yeah, if we could just shift the fifth and the sixth to the sixth and the seventh. I'd not have a problem, but probably everybody else does.
I'm still gonna have a problem. Well, Wednesday is the opening night
Oh,
theater, so I can't do it.
Didn't help you.
Well, let's try and go earlier on the
Mhm.
5th. I think that'll work.
Also, we can try to get like the voting items done early, you know, those, we can. We have to set up the agenda a certain way, but then when we get here, y'all can change it. And so we can make a recommendation on how to help get people out.
Okay.
And I won't be here for the sixth because it is opening. Why we did this? The opening night is on that Wednesday night for some reason. But. Okay, so
We won't be voting on the sixth, correct?
no, we won't be voting.
Yes, you might. You might approve, well, you'll have the program to read for a while. And you may approve the program. And then they'll go off and start design. Or we have to have a meeting relatively quickly after that to make whatever changes you want to the program so that they can keep going.
Okay,
And just address something that Brandon just brought up. It's possible that if there's an issue on the 6th, that we could make changes and then bring it to was this the 14th, the next, the workshop?
Are you talking about July?
July, yes.
In July, the workshop is on the 12th.
Okay, potentially, we could just say, we'll make some modifications and bring it back to you on the 12th. And we can set a voting meeting at that time. To take that pressure off, but I wouldn't want to go more than a week.
okay.
Make that work.
I don't know if I followed that very well.
There's,
So we have a meeting on the 5th. Are we canceling the meeting on the 6th?
No, that's with the architects
Okay,
for their presentation.
okay,
If we want to make a decision on what they decide on, or what we decide on the 6th, versus saying we could bump the decision to the 11th if we have to, or the 12th if we
12th.
have to.
okay,
prefer that you make the decision on the 6th, but we could go to the 12th because we do have another meeting scheduled, Rob.
okay.
Okay, I just have one question that came up earlier from Jan's comment about the breweries. Are we having any issue with the outflow from the breweries?
No, but it's a good question, based on everything that's been in the paper and
Yeah.
whatnot. I've already reached out to some of the breweries. I've made contact with Paladin and let them know that we would like to sit down and have a discussion with the breweries, because although they're not an issue for us right now, I just want to be certain that if they have any plans to expand their production, that we're aware of that, so we know what's going to be impacting the treatment plant. But what our greater issue is, and it also affects the breweries in addition to all the other restaurants, is our fats, oils, and grease. And so we will be working on getting a process in place that lets them know what we're going to be doing to notify them of problems that we see and actions that we're asking them to take.
Great.
So when they applied for their permit as a brewery, did they say at that time what they felt the volume would be? Are they kind of locked into an amount?
My team told me at the time, this came to the surface when Pelican Brewing was coming in. Because prior to that, there were some questions that had been asked, and the wastewater team took a deep dive and kind of looked just with bills and what the previous restaurant was before Public Coast got in there.
Mhm.
And that it wasn't an issue. In fact, if anything, it was actually helping the plant. Because those products are the good kind of food that the plant.
Yeast. Yeah.
But once Pelican got in, they didn't really know what the impact could be without knowing what their production was going to be. So they gave some estimates on what they had planned for that location. But we haven't really had any follow-up to see how that's changed or what their forward looking is at this point. The good thing for the city's part is that they're landlocked. I mean, so from a production perspective, none of those locations can actually grow to expand their production, but it doesn't mean that they wouldn't necessarily get, juice, if you will, from one of their other bigger productions. Pelican's a good example because Pacific City is their bigger.
Yeah, that was my question. Do they have two different plants at this point? Yeah.
And so I think, just having that discussion and kind of seeing what they have, on the horizon. Going into summer, this is not an ideal time to ask them to sit down and have this discussion, especially when it's not an issue. But I've asked them to give us dates that they can sit down and talk to us about it, and us just let them know what we would like to have. It'd be great if they just gave me their annual or quarterly report that they have to report to the state anyway. Then they don't have to do anything extra, and they can just share with me what their production is. And we know where everybody is. And so we know any, potential impact to our plant. But the fats, oils, and grease is a whole different thing, and it needs some more immediate attention.
Mhm. Talk to Gerhard about that.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Speaking of dates, any dates yet from the Chamber of Commerce?
No, and we told them that if they wanted to have the hotel people, restaurant people, whoever, they could meet with CETA before the meeting on Friday. You could come in and do a drop-in, and had no one show up. They'll be asking them again. And I don't have a date, for them coming in front of the council,
That's what I was concerned about. Yeah.
which is supposed to be before the budget is done.
I still say we might want to review their contracts since they don't seem to be living up to their end of the bargain.
They are not.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.